Hello, I'm Bruce Zimmerman, and this is the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week. June is always a time when we start to look at our plants. We finished our planting, and we have to do some maintenance. And the maintenance that we're looking at are deadheading, fertilizing, trimming, etc. So let's cover a few of the plants that need to be dealt with at this time of year. Many of the peonies, now these are the herbaceous peonies, are just finishing. And as they get sort of rotten, either from rain or just age, you don't want to spill a lot of the petals onto the ground. It makes a bigger mess. One that's sort of unattractive and you want to go and clean up. So if you're going to do this and they're sort of falling over a little bit, which peonies, particularly the herbaceous ones, have a tendency to do this, what you want to do is you can put down a drop sheet. Just make sure that the drop sheet is not on any other plants that will, of course, heat in sunlight. So choose an early morning to actually do the pruning. The deadheading goes back to a good strong leaf. Now, many peonies produce multiple sets of blooms on the ends of each stem. So you may have to go in and actually just clip and deadhead as opposed to pruning back to a strong leaf or side branch. Now, with each one, you're going to leave some, and some are going to continue to bloom. Some, which just don't seem to ever mature, actually go and rot. They get botrytis. If this is the case, make sure you do take them off as well, since you do not want the botrytis to overwinter in soil, in the organic matter of the soil. And that's important. So you do clean up, but you always leave the developing flowers, the nice flowers. It's a progression of deadheading, not just, we're going to go and do it all today. And that makes for a longer blooming time, prettier, and probably a little less cleanup since you're getting there and doing the deadheading as the flowers start to shatter. You want to get there beforehand. Now, with rhododendrons, you want the deadheading to happen at a particular time. The rhododendrons have a tendency to go and put new growth up right behind the flower bud. You'll see the rings where the flower bud will snap off quite easily. And so you can either use your fingernails, you can use a little pair of pruners, snips, etc., and prune to this point early enough that the new growth coming up, which is sticky, is going to not be damaged, and that's important. That's your new growth for this coming year. Though that sticky little leaves are going to grow up into such big, green, bold, evergreen leaves. So make sure that you do it at the proper time. Now, one other secret about doing all deadheading and pruning on plant material. You never do it when it's wet. So you have to wait until the foliage is dry. Otherwise, you're more likely just to spread disease and open up a lot of wounds to disease. So when the foliage is dry, sunny, rain's probably not going to happen for at least a day, then go in and do your deadheading. It's very important. Now, once you've deadheaded a rhodo and you've gotten all the flowers, you want to make sure, since the flowers are sticky, the new growth is sticky, that you do make sure you go and remove each of the little florets that do fall off. This is the other reason why timing is important. You want to make sure you get there before the florets are all over the place and stuck to your plant. It makes it a little easier. So do your timing. And also, that's the time to mulch and to fertilize with a rhododendron food. That is the best time. And pick your ones that you want, whether it's an organic one, a granular, or even a water soluble. With water solubles, remember they're quick, you're adding more moisture, so be careful. Rhododendrons do not put their roots down as much as they put their roots up. So mulching annually, making sure that they're fed, kept watered, is very, very important, particularly during late summer drought, because that's when the new flower buds are starting to develop for next year. Now with roses, when you deadhead, you sort of look for a spot, a set of leaves. Now, this set of leaves is picked with a purpose. One, it's a full set of leaves, a full leaflet. In other words, that full leaf is going to have the standard amount of leaflets that that plant gets. Roses may get 5, 7, or even 9 leaflets on a standard leaf. Just because they have a certain number of leaflets does not mean that it's reverted or gone wild. If you don't recognize the understock leaves from the regular leaves, leave it for a while, because I guarantee that the flowers that do develop will certainly tell you what is alive and what needs to be removed really quickly. With roses, cut back down to a full leaflet and away from the center of the plant or in the direction in which you wish the plant to develop. Very often a rose bush will have a weak side, so you make sure you're keeping all the buds on that side pointing out, or on the other side pointing not necessarily in, but maybe a little farther down the stem, because the further down the stem you go, the longer it takes for the next set of blooms to develop. But with roses, you have to have growth before you can have flowers. Result is that after you've done your deadheading, pruning, etc., go in and feed with a good rose food and cultivate it around, and make sure that there is no water ever applied to the leaves of the rose bush. This only encourages mildew and black spot. And if you do get a little bit, first sign, go in, pick off leaflets, pick off some of the leaves, make sure none have fallen to the ground, and if they have, get them up quickly before watering or before the next rain, because the spores from the diseases can overwinter both on the plant and on the organic matter in the soil. So make sure that that's cleaned up. Sanitation, in other words, is your first best line of defense against disease. Now, we mentioned feeding, etc. Excessive feeding of any plant encourages excessive soft tissue growth. That soft tissue growth is actually very attractive to insects. It's soft, it's tender, it's juicy, there's lots of nutrients, and of course, moisture. So, overfeeding, causing excessive growth, actually attracts problem insects as opposed to just them getting the normal amount. That plant will suddenly be the one that everybody likes. Now, you can manipulate this if you want and say, I want them all to attack that particular plant over there, and do that. But it doesn't always work. Let's be honest. Insects will have a mind of their own. With tulips, these plants, once they have started to yellow and brown, are not quite ready to be pulled yet. Now, the best way to do this is wait until they're very yellow, very brown, almost laying on the ground, flopped over, so that when you pull and twist at the same time, the stalk of the leaves on the tulips actually snaps off at the top of the bulb, maybe as much as 6 or 8 inches down in the ground. So when you do pull it up, you're going to have that long white stem that was in the ground and never exposed to sunlight. This means that you've got a good, clean bulb ready to actually bloom well for you the following year. That's the other reason why you wait until all the energy is back into the bulb, by waiting until the leaves are very brown and very yellow, almost laying down. Same thing with daffodils. Do not tie your daffodils off. A lot of people in the old days, I know when I was a boy, they tie their daffodils in a knot to make them finish off quicker. What they were doing is actually not allowing the plant to build enough food for next year, and the flowering would degrade slowly. You wouldn't get as many offsets, and the offsets, of course, are young ones, and eventually those offsets actually develop large enough bulbs that they too bloom. So don't do that. Go and leave them until they too are very, very brown, very, very yellow, and laying on the ground. If you wait long enough, you can just simply pull them with your hand right off at the ground level or just below and never disturb the bulb at all. If you're in a little bit of a hurry and you do it a little too soon, A, you're going to disturb the bulb. B, it's going to have to be cut off as opposed to just gently pulled or tugged off. And that's when you know you should really be waiting for a few more days or maybe even a week longer before you actually do take all the leaves off your daffodils. With hydrangeas, they're coming into bud and bloom at this time of year. If you haven't changed the pH of the soil, you can, but it's going to take some time. This is not a one-shot deal. You do it slowly. You want to change and adjust the pH so that you actually go and change the color of the bloom. If you want blue, and many people do, because blue is such a hard color to get into the garden, then you need garden sulfur. Please don't use aluminum sulfate. It can be toxic and it can build up in the soil. It takes a lot, but again, not always the best thing. Some of the garden sulfurs are better than others. The Spoma puts out an extremely good one. This will slowly change the pH of the soil down to below 6. Below 6 you get blue, and if you go too far, you can actually get a little bit too blue and it gets into a purpley color. I have seen a few where the pink couldn't quite make up its mind on plants, and for some reason or other, there was pink and blue flowers on the same plant. Doesn't happen very often. It usually means that somebody has been playing and changed their mind, and some spots in the soil are acidic and some are more alkaline, closer to neutral. Above 6.5 to 7, which is neutral, you will find you'll get pink. Now, one of the best things to do with pink is to add calcium carbonate and calcium and magnesium in several forms. Now, Parkwood puts out a soil sweetener. It's called Make It Pink, and you can try it. Now, you should read the label on this. You should not breathe this in. Get this in your eyes. Once you've opened it up, you have to store it in a cool, dark, dry place. All the things you should know about fertilizer storage, same thing. So make sure that you do this. If you're going to get it on yourself, make sure you wash thoroughly as well. This will raise the pH. Now, changing pH, whether it's to be acidic or to be alkaline, making the plant either blue or pink, depends on the first pH. So you should use a pH meter to test it. Then when you do pick which way you're going to go, start adding it slowly. You will find that sandy soil moves the easiest with the least amount of additive. Loamy soil, that sort of good average soil that has both sand, clay, and organic matter in it, basically almost the perfect soil, will be sort of middle of the road amounts to change the pH to either create pink or blue plants. Clay is the hardest to move. It'll take the most material, and it is difficult. So if you're a clay-based person, be patient. You're going to have to apply it several times, checking the pH between. It may take you a year or more in order to get the pH to achieve what you want to give you the color you want. And as a result, you may find that you also have to check the pH in coming years in order to maintain the color and the pH of the soil. Both of those work. Both of those can be done with almost all of the hydrangeas, though the lace caps seem to be the prettiest ones to move when you're moving them from pink to blue. Then that again is a personal decision. One other thing I'd like to talk about is the Never Alone rose. Now, we talked about pruning roses and removing the spent roses down to a leaflet. But what happens if, like with Never Alone, the roses are in a bouquet? In other words, they're usually smaller roses in clusters that create its own little bouquet. Well, what you do is you are very selective. You go in and you take out only the worst or the most finished of the blooms, allowing the rest to continue. Now, this is a maintenance thing. A lot of people don't do it, but it does actually help. Never Alone Rose is been supported by the Canadian Nursery Landscape Association and the Canadian Rose Societies, and of course the Canadian Football League Alumni Association. And the whole point of this rose is, one, it is a rose that was developed at Morden Research Station, which, of course, their breeding program is been famous for a long time. You just don't know how many plants were actually bred there because it doesn't say. But these were bred for hardiness, reliability in Canadian gardenings. And in Canadian gardens, you've got the Never Alone rose. Again, a rose in clusters. The plant itself is 2 feet tall, about, I would say 1.5 feet wide, though I think it's going to be a little wider. I've been looking at mine. And so I would give it a little bit of room. Remember, the red and white rose with the yellow center, as it matures and finishes, each little flower rose goes more and more red. It seems to lose its white. A little bit of the yellows does remain, but it basically disappears. So the center, which is like the sun, actually sort of lasts. It's the focal point. The red and the white sort of blend together, and eventually the white fades to more and more red. It is designed to represent the sun and the fact that they are never alone. And a lot of the proceeds for this particular rose will go to support cancer patients so that they never need to go through their treatments alone. And so please plant a Never Alone rose in your garden, because it is, one, very hardy, very disease resistant, particularly to black spot, and it's pretty. It's controlled, it's gorgeous, and the foliage is very, very nice. It's sort of a glossy green foliage, but a lot of the new growth has that reddish tinge. One of my favorite combinations in rose foliage. So plant Never Alone rose. Well, you're going to say, oh, the roses don't grow here. Well, remember, it was bred at Morden. And that's in Manitoba. And Manitoba's a little colder than a lot of places in Canada, so try it and see. I've been told that it's hardy to zone 3, so go for it. We'll try. Let me know and see how hardy this rose really is. I'm Bruce Zimmerman. This is the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week.